Welcome to Music Matters 2020. I'm your host, Jason Tramm. On our new podcast, you join us for the topics that are relevant to the music industry today. Classical music from many different parts of our genre and from our world, and seen through the eyes of our distinguished members of our artistic community. Today we have a wonderful, internationally acclaimed concert pianist, Miss Julia Zilberquit, who will be joining us a little later on. But we're excited that you, our audience, can be here. And feel free to text in your questions and to let us know how you feel. This is a conversation between both the artists who are part of this community and also people who love that art. So I want to open up as much communication as possible, and I encourage you to join us in this journey. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have some thoughts as I was going about my day. I'm an artistic director. I'm a conductor. I've been in the music business for 25 years. I'm also a university professor. I have been a public school music teacher in my past. I'm a church musician. I'm also an artistic consultant. And pretty much if there's a job in music, I've done it. And one of my favorite things in my career has been the discussion with my colleagues. I've always found great inspiration in the mutual synchronicity of sitting down and talking with both audience members and artists, as I feel that it's just an incredible way to expand our ideas and to get the creative juices flowing. So on this channel, that is my goal, is to start that communication. And in this time period of COVID-19, we face unique challenges that have never been faced before. And this is a chance for us to talk about how we move forward as an artistic community, both as individuals and as a community at large. And we move and we serve audiences like you, and we would like to get your opinions as well. So my thoughts for the day. I was just thinking about the last 3 months, and I guess when everything first hit, before COVID, I was used to 8 rehearsals a week with my university, with my choral societies, and then I would guest conduct, and I would travel, and I was used to a really frantic schedule, and all of a sudden the whole world seemed to stop. And for a week there, I was left just baffled and confused and in dark kind of depression. And I started to think, I was missing 20 performances I've already missed in this time period. But I started to change my focus, and I started to just think about where I was and what I'm doing and the communities that I serve. And I started by reaching out to members of the community, starting Zoom rehearsals, getting people on the line, getting people to come, and then to provide music for those people. For my amateur members of my choral society, it was very important to maintain the weekly rehearsals, keep the dialogue flowing, keep the rehearsals. For my other, I've also made a point to reach out to as many artist colleagues as possible just to see how they're doing and to touch base and let them know that we all still care about each other. I think that's critical in this time of COVID, that we keep our connections close, keep our communities intact, because when this is over, we're going to need music more than ever. I'd like to introduce our guest for tonight, Miss Julia Zilberquit, an acclaimed pianist, and I'm so excited she's here tonight. The music you heard in the introduction was a performance we did of K488 of Mozart, and she played that brilliantly, and I'm so delighted to have her with us. Julia, welcome.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to be here. I think it's a great initiative. I really like it. I think it's very important, as you said, to communicate between us, between the artists and our audience at this particularly hard time. You know, it's been 3 months since we're all quarantining and in isolation somewhat. So I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you.
So tell our listening audience about your journey as an artist. Where did you study? How did you come to music? How old were you when you started? Give us a short tour through the life of Julia Zilberquit.
Sure. I was born in Moscow, in Russia, in a musical family. My grandmother was a very acclaimed piano teacher, and she actually studied in Odessa Conservatory with a professor who in turn was a student of Scriabin. And my father, whom you've met, Dr. Mark Zilberquit, he is a pianist, musicologist. He owns the biggest music publishing house in Russia now, which is called Musica. And in fact, it's his birthday today, so happy birthday, Dad.
Birthday.
Yes, so I started playing and studying music very early. I was 4, and I went to a special music school in Russia, which I graduated. Just for our audience, for the reference, it's the school where you start at the age of 5 and finish at 17, where you have music and musical theory subjects along with academics. And just to name drop, a good friend of mine and a classmate was famous acclaimed pianist Evgeny Kissin. So we were in the same class and the same, even though, he became famous quite early and didn't attend school on a daily basis. So then I graduated, and me and my family immigrated to United States in 1989, and I started my Juilliard years with a famous and amazing pianist, Bela Davidovich, also a Russian pianist, who I'm sure many of the audience members know. And I had my bachelor and my master's with her. And I have to say that we remained very close friends up to this day. And almost like a family member, because her son, who is a famous conductor and violinist, Dmitry Sitkovetsky, has been my colleague. We've performed together for many, many times as a duo, when he was a conductor and I was playing with him. We did many premieres together, so it's a very, very sort of close relationship. And then after Juilliard, I won my first international major competition, which was in Vienna. And I guess my career of a performing artist started with a big highlight. There was a Beethoven Concerto No. 4 that I was performing in Vienna with Sir Yehudi Menuhin, who was quite old, but he was still a wonderful conductor. So that's kind of how it all started, and I suppose it went on from there, the concerts, the recordings, and sort of, the life of an artist, traveling and all that we're missing right now.
Certainly, and a wonderful training with some of the greatest people in the world. Tell us what lessons you learned from Bela Davidovich, such a great and acclaimed artist, and I'm sure a wonderful mentor. So tell us, what did she pass on?
She really was, in fact, a wonderful mentor. Right now, it's very sort of fashionable to talk about women's place in art and feminism, but back then it was really important for me that she in fact was a woman, and there was a perspective that really it was important to me, and it was a lot of little things that we need to know, for example, as we travel, as we know our concert dresses, like what do we do with that? And of course, she was an amazing musician. And I have to say, one of the things that I love about her playing is a famous touch, that touché, that beautiful sound, which is associated with her. And in fact, with her teachers, the famous Russian piano school of playing. She was a student of famous Professor Igumnov and Flier. And those guys really, there's a whole lineages that goes for Zilberquit, for Liszt, back to Czerny and Beethoven. So it's a very, for musicians, the lineage is very, very important. And it's a great pride when we can really trace it as to the greatest name in music history.
Certainly, to pass down that knowledge from generation is one of the most important things that our mentors do, and it lives on with us when they do not. I think that's really a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, it was really an amazing, and Bella is alive and well, and we keep in touch, and she has wonderful stories about many, many musicians and many, many famous conductors that she's performed with. And sometimes when I'm teaching my students, I relay her stories. So it's also that sort of intergenerational thing, which I think is very important. As we love chatting and talking about our experiences with our colleagues, and of course we love famous musician stories. Where would we be without them, right? So I just think it's wonderful, and I was very lucky to have that experience. And of course, also, my father has been a huge figure in my music education. I still play for him. He listens to me from time to time. We discuss repertoire or some recordings because, I respect him tremendously, and he does have that's sort of a very broad spectrum of being on both performing and music publishing world, and sort of a bit of a management world. So he has that sort of the other perspective, which is, I think, very important to have.
So how has your perception of music changed? What do you remember from your earliest training, being 4 years old? What do you remember about music when you were young? And how has that shifted as you've matured into a professional artist?
Well, it always starts, especially in the musical families, when they discovered you have some sort of a musical talent. In my case, they discovered I had a perfect pitch. So, I started very early. And of course, as a child, you don't want to practice. It's very common. You want to be with your friends, playing in the yard. But in that respect, I have to say that our school, the Gnessen Special Music School, as well as the Central Music School, the Conservatory School, we were surrounded by children who were also playing an instrument from the age of 5. So we knew when we were practicing, our friends were practicing. I would say that my relationship with my own career, with my own performing arts, really changed when I started Juilliard, because as you know, in Europe and in States, the education is very different, the primary music education. So there were a lot of people who went to the same schools as I did, but then there were a lot of people who, they would play for high school orchestras, or they didn't have as much formal training, I guess, as us. So it really made me realize, first of all, appreciate our training, how rigorous it was and how well prepared we were. But also, it made me accept all sorts of different approaches and, people who ended up at the same school. And I would say I got pretty serious at Juilliard. There was back then, I would say there was a very healthy competition, for the pianist at
now
least.
that you've got a busy career, I have a question. Do you have a family as well?
Yes, I have a family, and I'm actually very much involved in my family. I have a husband and 2 children. My daughter just turned 14, and she's graduating officially from middle school tomorrow.
Congratulations.
So it's a big day. And my son is turning 18, and he's one of those, I don't want to say a word unfortunate, but he's a high school senior. So we just got his diploma, but he is one of those people who got really hit very hard by COVID, of course, missing his prom and his high school. Well, we're hoping it's postponed, but anyway, he's missed it so far. And also there's a lot of uncertainty whether they're going to start school. He was accepted to Boston University. We're very happy. It was his first choice. And just today we got a letter from the university, as I'm sure as a professor, that they're still contemplating on how they will start. They will start the classes, but whether it's going to be virtual or in person or a mix of both, they still don't know. So we're all in the dark here.
I know my university is calling it a high flex model, where we'll be a mixture of virtual and live elements. So that'll be unfolded. I think the universities themselves are frantically dashing around trying to figure out what that's going to be as well. So. Oh.
Exactly. And for us, what it means is for many parents, and I'm sure in our audience, there's a lot of parents of upcoming freshmen or any other college students, we really want him to start, and he wants to start, but we're not sure whether it's going to be here from home or from the dormitory, or, it's a whole new world, and I think we're just taking it one day at a time at this point.
I suppose that's all we can do. I'm also a father of 4, so I feel you, and I understand where you're coming from. And I have a question from our audience. Kristen from Nanuet, New York asks, do your children study music as well?
Oh, it's a great question. So, of course, when they were little, they started playing piano, and my son studied until up about 13 and 14, and my daughter studied until about 10. I have to say that I did not want to push them. And when I saw that they stopped enjoying it and it wasn't really going anywhere, I was the one who stopped the lessons. I do regret it, I have to say. But I didn't want to be one of those, umbrella mothers who would make their kids do something they really didn't enjoy. Plus, they had a somewhat musical talent, I would say, but I didn't see anything, when you see something so significant and this child, even if you make him perform, he or she will become, a very famous musician, or that the music will. So since I did not see that, I honestly didn't see the point of pushing them. My son did tennis professionally. He still plays, not now, of course, but he does play. And my daughter was also doing gymnastics and a lot of other things that they do enjoy. So I figured that I would stick to the things that they really enjoy and excel at.
Well, my mentor, Alfredo Filippini, who was a famous Verismo conductor, also a family man as well, he told me that the musicians generally don't push their kids into music because we all know how hard the business can be. Certainly.
That is true. That was also my consideration. And this is why I didn't want to push because, especially nowadays and, here in the United States, a perfect example is the COVID, because as we all know, our European colleagues got big packages from the government, from Ministry of Culture, for example, Austria or Germany, whether here and even in my, in Russia where I was born, the musicians are pretty much left to their own devices in that sense.
Yeah, it's a very tenuous time for so many of our colleagues. I have so many of my friends who are freelance orchestral musicians, and I work as a conductor, so I work with hundreds of musicians a year, and I've been keeping in touch, and many of them have no work at all. They're just scrambling and waiting for things to open up again, and I think it's a tough time to be an artist.
It's very tough, yes, very tough.
So tell me about what a week before COVID might look like. I know you're very busy traveling. You do a lot of festivals internationally. Tell me about your what might a typical week of Julia Zilberquit look like.
Well, because I do have a family, as you mentioned, there are periods where I travel. And then there are periods that I stay here and, be with my family. So it's very packed one month and it's not packed as much the month after. So it's kind of the schedule. Plus, I do a lot of concerts in Europe and in Russia, in that side of the world. So what I try to do is I try as much as I can to pack them together so I don't have to cross Atlantic all the time. But I have to say it was quite a busy year and I was very lucky because the last performance I did in New York, it was Saturday, the last weekend before everything closed. It was March 7th. And I did a Bach D minor concerto with a wonderful group called Bachanalia. It was founded by a famous Russian violinist, Nina Bailina, who's lived in the United States for many years. And now her son, Emil Chudnovsky, who is a great violinist and teacher, he lives in DC, he wanted to recreate that orchestra. So it was a lovely concert which was dedicated to Bach's birthday and to her birthday. And I have to say we had a full house. And, people were not afraid of COVID back then. And it was a big sense of accomplishment because we were very happy that it happened. But on the other hand, we had to change the conductors 3 days before the concert because our conductor, a wonderful musician, a wonderful violinist and conductor, Michael Gutman, he was in Milan and he couldn't get to America already. The borders were closing in. So, we did get hit by COVID. So after that, I was supposed to take a break, which I did. Of course, it lasted more than I wanted. And then suddenly I had a very busy summer coming up with a lot of festivals in Europe, and one by one they started postponing. I have to happily say they have not been canceled. They have been postponed. I was supposed to premiere my own arrangement of a Shostakovich Concertina in Germany at the Shostakovich Festival they have near Dresden. It's a very, very big, I would say the biggest Shostakovich festival in the world, with a Guillen House Orchestra. And I was fortunate to have it sort of transferred to next June. And then at the end of August, I was supposed to also premiere a trio by a wonderful Georgian Israeli composer, Joseph Bardanishvili, dedicated to a memory of another recently deceased Georgian composer, Gia Concelli, who was a great friend. And also that concert got postponed to 2021. I do have to say that some of my friends and colleagues who have the festivals in Italy, who are directing little festivals in Italy, or not so little, one in Pietrasanta and another one in Lerici, they just informed me that they will go on in a smaller arrangement. But, I was scheduled to be there next summer anyway, not this coming summer. But I was so happy to hear that some things are opening up again, and they're starting again, even though I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of artists and a lot of audience members will feel, I don't know, attending, I would imagine, because we don't know yet what's going on.
I know that we're looking at severe limitations on size of audience. I heard the Musikverein's opening up this week, I believe, or next week, that they're opening up. So things are starting to slowly come back to life. But I think audiences are going to be a challenge. I think virtual, I think broadcasts are going to be big this year, even when music does start to come together. We're not sure of how close the wind players can be next to each other, if it's dangerous. Singers are certainly choral singers. It's going to be a new normal even as we start to unwind and come back to our lives again.
That is true, and I'm so glad you mentioned virtual fact, because one of the things that I really concentrated during that time, as we all had a break, one way or the other, I finally was able to put together a new YouTube channel. Everybody's welcome to my channel under Julia Zilberquit. And I was able to find some old recordings to edit them. It's a whole big job. And then I was able to, sort of edit our recording of Mozart K488, which was a great experience. It was a pleasure performing with you, Jason. And, we've talked about it for so long. And finally, we made it happen. And I'm sure we're going to do a lot of more projects together, but
Absolutely.
It was really important for me. And, to do this interview, I had another podcast with a wonderful British journalist, David Taylor, that I met in Malta Festival, just to talk about it, because sometimes it's important to talk about music. It's as important to talk about music and performing arts as it is to perform and do another virtual performance. And I agree with you. I think a big chunk of our future will be connected to the recordings, to the virtual concerts, and it is a whole new world. As I said, we'll just have to get used to it.
I love in our business, it's all about friends of friends and colleagues who we know. And we were put together by a composer, David Winkler, he'll be on the show in a couple of weeks. And David's Long Island Concert Orchestra, we partnered up and did a three-way kind of collaboration. And we just went out for lunch. A couple lunches later, we had that beautiful Mozart concert. And I was privileged to work with you on that. We played the second movement as the introduction to the show, and it was so elegant. And you played that Italian, those Italian phrases so beautifully.
Thank you. Yes, David is wonderful. David Winkler, he has introduced us, and then we found out that we have many, many friends in common. In fact, the two festivals in Italy that I mentioned, they're also friends of David, and they're friends of mine. So music world is really quite small when we think about it, right? We know that, and usually you know somebody. And it's wonderful when you can perform with your friends and you could be on stage. And honestly, this is something that I really miss, and I think I'll miss it for a while, just being on stage with people. I love doing chamber music as well as solo. I love performing with orchestra, whether chamber or symphony orchestra. It's such a wonderful experience for us, because as a pianist, we generally do things solo and alone. And it's so wonderful to share the stage and have a live audience response. So that's something I have to say I really miss.
I spend most of my days, the last month has been spent editing virtual choir and virtual orchestra recordings, putting together individual phone videos of people's work and making them to an ensemble. That it's so strange and so surreal when I think about, I miss the 50 people in front of me and moving a phrase with them, or listening to a soloist like yourself play this beautiful phrase, and I come in with the orchestra and I adapt my interpretation from what you're doing, and that conversation. That's one of the things I miss the most as an artist.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. But I have to tell you, on the other hand, when I found out that in the fall of 2020, the big houses like Metropolitan Opera or Lincoln Center are not yet opening, I felt it made a lot of sense. Because even as a listener, I don't know that I would be comfortable attending something so soon. I think by January 21, things will hopefully, settle down. And I even have some fall engagements abroad, in Europe and in Russia and in former, Russian republics, places like Ukraine or Kazakhstan. And honestly, I'm not yet sure of what's going to happen. I'm not yet sure how those transatlantic flights are going to take place. And, so I'm also not planning anything yet, and just kind of concentrating on maybe making some more recordings, maybe learning something new and repeating something old. It is very challenging, as you know, when you can't rehearse on Zoom with somebody. You have to spend a lot of time by yourself, at the piano, and it's usually we have a deadline, we have a concert to prepare to, or we have to learn something. So that also has been challenging, for me personally, as well as staying with the whole family at the apartment, sort of confined. It's all very challenging to all of us.
So how do you choose new repertoire? How do you get ideas for new projects? And you do a lot of different things, which I really enjoy about your work, is you're always looking for new collaborations and you're always out there putting things together. So how do you choose collaborations and pieces?
It comes from different ideas, but the main idea being that there's so many wonderful pianists, and the repertoire, even though it's quite large, but there's so many people who play the same pieces. So I guess I started thinking, what else could be done? What else can we do at the piano that haven't been, done or performed before? And in that respect, I have to say that I found several pieces. Some of that I arranged, some of that, sort of are just rarely played that I'm very proud of. So I guess I'll go by, a certain chronological order as I've done them. First big project for me was Shostakovich Concertina, originally written for 2 pianos for his son Maxim when he was in school. It's kind of a high school piece. Beautiful, we all played it in high school, and I really liked it. So what I did was I made an arrangement for piano and chamber orchestra. I wrote a cadenza. I made a little bit of a repeat. So it turned out to be a very small, about 20 minutes concerto. And when I showed it to Maxim Shostakovich, who was a wonderful conductor as well
Absolutely.
as, the composer's son, and, he said, it's funny that you've done that. My father always wanted to write a 3rd piano concerto. So there it is.
Amazing.
And, it was really a big success. I've recorded it with Vladimir Spivakov and Moscow Virtuosi. We played it all over the world. It was premiered in Carnegie Hall. The recording is actually on my YouTube. So that was my first big project. The second project was, Vivaldi wrote so many wonderful concertos for so many instruments, except for piano or harpsichord. We don't have anything by Vivaldi. So later on, Bach, who loved arranging his own music, and Corelli and Vivaldi, there were 2 concertos, one A minor for 2 violins and string orchestra, and the D minor for 2 violins and cello, that Bach later transcribed to an organ concerto, which he did a lot. And there's an arrangement for another concertos by Vivaldi that he's arranged for harpsichord, just not these 2. So then what I did was I took Vivaldi's orchestration, its original Vivaldi's orchestration, and worked with Bach organ part, and it became 2 concerti grossis for piano and string orchestra. So now we have 2 Vivaldi concerto. And those I also recorded with Moscow Virtuosi and a wonderful Lithuanian conductor who's deceased now, Saulius Sandeskis, and it was released on Warner Classics, and it's doing very well. It's on iTunes, it's in Spotify, and it was recorded along with the complete 7 keyboard concertos by Bach. Very proud of, as a project. And it kind of has a life of its own, because since then I made 2 more arrangements of these pieces, one for solo piano that I haven't recorded yet, and another one for 2 pianos, but it's more like a student and a teacher. There's an easier part and a little bit of a more challenging part. My third project had to do with a very famous Russian composer, Sergei Slonimsky, who unfortunately passed away this February, and who many viewers may know as the nephew of a famous Nicholas Slonimsky, who lived in LA and who wrote a famous, dictionary of music, musical dictionary. So Maestro Slonimsky was a very, very famous composer, very well known in Russia, and I approached him in the late 90s and asked him to write a piano concerto. Sort of wanted to commission it, and he said, no, I don't want to write, the genre is dead. So to make a long story short, not only that he wrote a concerto, he wrote a second concerto after that. So I have to say that, thanks to me, there's 2 new piano concertos. So he wrote a concerto in 1997, and he dedicated it to me, and it's called the Jewish Rhapsody for Piano and Orchestra. And it came about in the year of Israel's 50th anniversary. And 10 years later, Israel's 60th anniversary, I premiered it in Jerusalem with Jerusalem Symphony and wonderful Leon Botstein, who we all know and respect. And that's how, sort of our friendship started. And later on, we performed together at Carnegie Hall with him an American Symphony. Another very, I would say, not as well-known concerto by César Franck. It's called Le Jeans after Victor Hugo's poem. It's a one-movement concerto which was performed many years ago by Richter and Kondrashin, but quite forgotten. So the listeners can also see it on my YouTube channel. And I guess my final project, which I hope will share with you one day and with our audience, was that I found a Beethoven's concerto. I know it sounds quite bizarre, an unknown Beethoven concerto, but it's a concerto that he wrote when he was 14 years old, and we call it Concerto Number 0. It's a beautiful classical concerto in E flat major, and that's something that sort of COVID has interrupted because we're celebrating 250th anniversary this December of Beethoven's, and I was supposed to perform it, in many places, so that also got postponed. But I don't lose hope. I know that, we were planning to do a in Europe premiere. I know we will do it when things get back to normal.
Absolutely. I had a Beethoven year planned out. I had Symphony number 1, 2, and 3 all canceled within 3 weeks of each other.
Yes. And I remember I was really looking forward to that performances, and I had it in my calendar. I made sure that I'm here to hear you with those symphonies, and I know I will.
Well, they're all rescheduled, so it's just a matter of when it's safe and when things open up again. We have some questions from our audience, which I love to see. Mark from Dallas, Texas. How many hours do you practice a day?
Great question. It really very much depends for me. When I have a concert and preparing for a tour or something, it's, 4 to 6. But that if I don't have a concert, there are days that I may not practice at all, or I would do an hour or 2. I'm kind of a, sporadic person. I do a lot at once. And because, I guess because of my family and my sort of other responsibilities, there are days that I just have to do my organizational things. I also have to mention that I don't have a management, as I don't think you do. So I manage myself. So that requires a lot of time with emails and computers and that sort of thing. So I have to sort of divide, I wear 2 hats.
As artists, we have to wear so many hats. I mean, I know for me, it's all about some projects I create myself, some projects I'm a guest conductor, sometimes I work with other organizations, and it's just a wonderful variety. It gives us such a flexibility in our careers to be able to work with many different people and many different types of projects that I think that this current environment will be really about innovation and moving forward from many different ways and collaborations and ventures where we work together. I think that's going to be the way we move forward.
I agree. Plus, as you produce so many concerts, I co-produce some concerts as well. And, that there's a lot of organization going into that. You have to sort of, be a producer first, and you have to make sure everything's organized. Then you have to sit at the piano and play, and then you have to go back and, be a producer.
It never ends, and it's for the produce.
It never ends, absolutely.
The producing part can be quite a challenge, is working with artists and securing artists. But I always find that the artists are they're all looking forward to being part of something special. That when you find a special project, the artists are so eager to jump in and to share their talent with their audience, and it's magic.
It's magic, yes. And this is, again, something, as much as I love virtual connection, there is something that happens when you perform with a live audience. There's this, as you know, this connection, this chemistry that can only be, it cannot be reproduced virtually, unfortunately.
I was telling a story. I was going to tell this in my opening, but I forgot. I've been doing virtual performances, everything virtual for 3 months, and I had to go and record my staff at Ocean Grove. We have a 6,000 seat venue where we do church services and music, classical music. And I'm the music director. It's my 14th season. But this season, the choir, we've had a very strong and historic choral program there. Every year we have one of the largest choral gatherings on the East Coast, where we have a choir of around 700 to 1,000 people come from all over every year, and they sing this choir festival. They also sing in the morning in churches, and there's just been a history of this for 150 years. Well, this year there can't be choral singing together because of the COVID virus and the concerns about singers being super spreaders and the health of these people. So I said, I've been doing these virtual choir recordings. So we just did our first virtual project, and it airs this weekend on a full digital broadcast. But we had submissions from. We had one person submit from Australia, 2 people submitted from India. I mean, I don't even know how they found out about the recording, but people have been submitting their work in, and it really offers unique ways to participate that were never considered in the past. So in a way, I think it's interesting. But I was sitting in the venue listening to my professional singer, my staff. They all had to record their solos. And when I heard live singing, I literally started to cry because I forgot just how powerful and one voice can move you that much. And it really speaks to the heart.
I agree, and I'm so glad you mentioned that great auditorium in Ocean Grove, because, when we came to this country, I resided between New Jersey, where my parents were, and New York, where I went to school. So one of my first or second performances was actually at the Ocean Grove, where I played Schumann Concerto. Your predecessor, Father Alfonso, and I think it was called New Jersey Symphony or Monmouth Symphony. No, it was New Jersey Symphony. No, Monmouth Symphony. And it was wonderful. They're unbelievable. And I believe I played there twice, 2 summers in a row. And, I'm so looking forward one day to going back. So when I met Jason, and you told me that you are performing there, I thought this is fate. Because I remember we met at Asbury Park at the cafe, remember, for lunch.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes.
I love the Jersey Shore community. I've been part of that community for 14 years. It's my 14th season. I don't know where that time goes. But my children have been raised down there. My son was 1 when I got the position at Ocean Grove, and we've all grown up in that community.
Right. And, so have my children, because we used to own a house down the shore, and my kids grew up there as well. Unfortunately, we sold the house last year, and we could have really used it now with COVID. We're stuck in the city.
Yeah, it's Leonard Bernstein called that great auditorium. He said he called it the barn and compared it very favorably in acoustics to Carnegie Hall. So I always bring that up to my musical friends, and I think it's great that you performed there, and we'll have to bring you back one of these days.
Would love to come back.
So tell me about your advice you have. You said you teach as well?
I teach as well. I used to teach at the special music school here in New York, which is a bit of equivalent to the school where I went to. They have a very small classes, academics, and instruments. But then I started traveling more, and it's very hard to make up lessons with little children because they have to have it twice a week, as you know. So then I started teaching more grown-ups, and I have. Again, because of my traveling, I found that I absolutely love teaching amateur adults, people who play, for their own pleasure. They're wonderful. They're super intelligent. I love my students. And, they're very accomplished in their own careers. So they would, they love music. They come to my concerts, and we can have, sort of an intelligent conversations about the pieces they play. They're all pretty good, so they all play standard repertoire, and I have to say I enjoy it immensely.
I'm glad to hear that. That's I spend a lot of my time, especially with choruses. I work with wonderful amateur musicians who are brilliant people, and they give so much. And some of those performances, they move me so much because everyone gives their entire heart because they believe that this is their passion. It's not a 9-to-5 job per se, but it's something that they really feel they're passionate about, and it's exciting for them, and that's contagious.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
I worked with a choir in New York called More Artists, and the conductor was a well-known guy called Johannes Samari, and he said amateur means for the love of.
Exactly.
And people
Yes.
forget that sometimes. They say it's an amateur,
Yes.
but it doesn't mean lower performance standards. It means some people who do it for the love of. I think it's powerful.
Exactly. I agree with you. Yes. Yes.
I've got another question from our audience. Sally from Maine. Do you have any advice for people who want to go into the music field?
I do. I think you have to really love it. And I know it sounds very cliche. It is generally a very hard career to make, as you know. But when you love what you're doing, then, I'm sure you can persevere and anything can happen. But it's certainly not a money-making career. And it's a career where, as I said, 1 month I can have 5, 6 concerts, and another month I can have 0 concerts. So psychologically, it's very different from a 9-to-5 job. So you have to be really prepared for that. That's number one. And number two, if I had to give advice to, maybe, I don't know if Sally is, younger, or repertoire, I would recommend to learn as much repertoire as possible while you're still young. You're in high school, you're in college, because it really stays with you, as you probably know. Whatever you learn sort of before the age of 25 or 30, it stays with you for the rest of your life. Whatever you start learning later, you become busy with concerts, you don't have as much time, your memory may be not the same as it is when you're a young person. So for me, that's just an advice I would have given myself as a young person. It doesn't need to be perfect all the time, but just learn as much repertoire as you can, and then you're ready. You have a huge choice. When you're called to play a concert, you can choose from many pieces or concertos.
And going back and forth, going and seeing as many performers as you can, just witnessing great artists of every genre. Go to the opera, go to the symphony.
Yes.
Just be a part of music and watch as much as you can, because to absorb all of that is so important. And I loved in your opening about when you were talking about your experiences, you were surrounded by just great artists. And
Yes, I was very lucky because, my father was also writing about a lot of musicians, so I got to meet a lot of them personally, and a lot of them, and I even feel bad because, we would always go backstage, and how people would get autographs.
Sure.
And I always felt, why do I need to get an autograph from this person when I know them so well and they come to my house? So as a result, I don't have, the only autograph I do have and I cherish, when in 1986, Vladimir-Horowitz came to Russia.
Wow.
And I was so lucky. I came to there was an open rehearsal. There's a film about it on YouTube, and there's a rehearsal and the concert. So I was at the rehearsal, which was even better because he played a repertoire for about 3 concerts there. It was a 3-hour rehearsal. And I do have his amazing autograph where he was born in Russia, but he left a long time ago. So he mixes Russian and English letters when he writes to Julia from Vladimir Horowitz. So it's something I, treasure. But I have to say that people who study music now, they're so lucky because they have YouTube, they have Spotify, and they can see an old recording, they can see a new recording, they can have their own recording on the YouTube. It's something we did not have when we were growing up. There were live concerts and LPs or CDs. That's that. So that were our experience. So it's a good and bad. But right now, even when I prepare a piece or I practice and I want to hear, I don't know, Tchaikovsky trio with, Guillen's, Rostropovich and Kogan. Here it is. So, we have this great opportunities. So if you love music, there's so much to do. Even, now you can listen to the whole musical repertoire online now.
It's incredible. YouTube has really changed everything. I know.
Yes.
You can listen to, as opera singers, they can listen to every high note by every tenor of that same phrase. Sometimes in a single video, someone's compiled these things, and you can listen to,
Yes.
As a conductor, I love to, whenever I prepare something new, I love to see the historical parameters of my predecessors. I'll watch Claudio Abbado, and I'll watch, some of the great conductors approach those phrases, and it goes back so far in history. It's really an amazing testament that we can really use in our industry.
Yes, we're very lucky, I think, in that way.
Do you remember drop the needle exams? We had them as a music major. We have music history. They would take a record and they would drop the needle, and you had to identify what it was. My undergraduate students at Seton have no idea what that means. They think
Yes,
I'm a
yes.
dinosaur.
Yes, yes. Well, of course, I have to say there were fewer recordings back then, and we all knew them. We all knew, who did all the Mahler symphonies. So the choice wasn't, whatever was recorded. And, it's good and bad, because now on YouTube, they're great recordings, and they're recordings that, honestly, we wouldn't publish, as musicians. Everybody has a right to do so. And on that note, I have to say that I would like to invite everybody to visit and subscribe to my channel, Julia Zilberquit, juliazilberquit.com. It also has some very, very rare recordings. I also recorded a solo CD, which is called Mystery of Bagatelles. And it sort of follows the history of that piece. Bagatelles really means a trifle in French. But, I have recordings from Couperin and Beethoven, and then Liszt. There's a Liszt waltz that's called Bagatelle. There's Bartók, there's Saint-Saëns, and then there's Russian composers not as well known, Cherepnin and Denisov and Lyadov, of course. So it's a whole sort of anthology of the Bagatelle.
Fun.
And it's on also on iTunes and of course on my channel. So enjoy listening to it.
So what other projects have you come up with in your isolation and in your quarantine and time with family? Have you come up with any new projects? Are you starting any new ideas or things starting to gel? What's happening?
I am thinking about doing something also sort of a rearrangement of some Tchaikovsky pieces that I shall not name right now.
Okay.
But it's not my own arrangements. I just got the music recently, so I'm thinking about that. There's always a question of a demand, and if the label wants to produce it, or do you have to produce it yourself? So there's that. Both options are open for me, and I would generally love to record that Beethoven concerto, but it needs a little bit more. Because of this pause right now that we all took. It will also need to wait. I am learning the two new trios, as I told you, one by Joseph Bardanishvili and another one is by Guillen. Wonderful, wonderful composers, and it's very nice. And those trios there's two versions in each. It's a piano, two violins, and an orchestra, or piano, violin, and cello. So there's this option. So I have to learn different music for the same trios, and I'm really looking forward to performing them. I think it's very important for us as artists, as educators, to perform contemporary music that's written by our contemporaries, by our colleagues, and by a great composer. So I'm very happy that I am doing that finally. And also just repeating some old pieces that I haven't been able, didn't have a chance to play for a while. It's like visiting old friends,
I find the same thing whenever I approach a piece I've done, so like especially Verdi for me, because I've done a lot of Verdi in my career. Whenever I come back to it, it's like looking at a painting a different way. I get a completely different interpretation than I thought of it 5 years ago, because I'm older, I view things differently, and my worldview has changed. I think that we shift as artists, so it's just like looking at great art.
I agree with you. And as a matter of fact, for example, that Mozart concerto that we did, I did it first in school, then I did it after my competition, then again. So, every time you approach it, you remember, you sort of remember the past, you bring in the future. So it's kind of, a story of your life within a piece, right? Your feeling towards it, how you change, hearing of it changes, how, you find, I don't know, some new harmonies that are not new, but you hear them in a whole
and it changes the articulation and the overall interpretation entirely.
Agree. So there's two recordings of if I put my own recordings of, I don't know, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and now they're all different.
So I was looking at a painting. So I hear that you're really into art. So tell us about your love of art and how that's affected you as a musician.
I love collecting things. I collected little things, big things, and at some point, I grew up with paintings. My father had a collection of theater, theater decoration paintings, for which, Russian painters are very famous. Then he had a lot of etching, very old etching. So, I grew up sort of surrounded by art in all forms and shapes. So I started collecting, I would say me and my husband, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. And first it was just random paintings that we liked, and then it took a shape of a theme. So basically my collection has to do with a movement that was called Second École de Paris. So it's the artists from Eastern Europe, from Russia and Eastern Europe of Jewish origins, that ended up in Paris. They studied in Paris, they lived in Paris in 1920s and 30s. And then some of them immigrated to America, luckily. Some of them, unfortunately, perished, during the World War II and the Holocaust. So there's a lot of different, different lives there, different painters. So I have a nice collection. It started sort of with a Russian artist, and then it expanded. And it's very interesting to learn about those people, to learn, how they're artistic and, also how they change through the years, if they're lucky enough to live a long life. I would say a couple of names that are just very well known in that, like Marc Chagall or Chaim Soutine. Now, I don't have, big works by those artists because they're just very expensive. But this is sort of the direction that they gave. There was a lot of young artists who looked up to them or who studied with them. So it's wonderful. It's been my sort of hobby for years. And of course, now with COVID, everything stopped, and my collecting also stopped as well. But I'm sure it will resume.
Do you get inspiration from looking at those certain paintings? How does that affect your music making?
I do. I even have some paintings that have to do with music, not all of them. I have a wonderful a pianist and a trio by a lady named Esther Karp, and then I read about her. She was living in Poland, and she actually ended up in an asylum, just like Van Gogh, and she loved music. Apparently she was a musician. She was also an artist. So, you look at those paintings, of course you draw an inspiration, and it's always nice to, I cannot say that I associate a certain piece of music with a certain paintings, as some people do, but it's just a general, I would say, general direction, and it's just been a wonderful hobby. I always find it more relaxing to go to an art exhibit rather than maybe a concert or an opera, because in a concert or an opera, I'm starting to hear, if I like it, if I don't like it, are they hitting the right notes, if you like the interpretation. So it becomes you do open-minded. I love when my friends perform. I'm not very critical of them when they do it, because but I do find art, a visual art, for me, it's more inspirational and more relaxing, and it's just something, that I love doing.
Well, I always love to take a break and go walk in a museum, and I can lose myself in a museum for hours, and I don't feel like I'm working. Just like you said, I feel like I'm always on the clock if I'm at an opera, and I always meet colleagues, and it's just something for me when I go to engage with art. So
yes.
That's special.
Yes, yeah, it's special. I also have to say that thanks to my friends, I have a lot of friends in the art world. I've been exposed to a lot of, again, contemporary art. And it's nice. I've met some artists. It's very, for a classical musician, the repertoire used to be very rigid. So the paintings we used to love were also very rigid, sort of, impressionists and, maybe Picasso and that sort of thing. So I'm glad that my horizons have opened up, and, I know a lot of living artists, and I've always go when there's something contemporary in New York or in Miami or in Europe. I always go and see it, because I think it's important, for an artist and for a musician, not only to play contemporary music, but also know what's going on in the art world right now.
We have a question from the audience. Let's take one of these. James from Miami has a question. Tell us about, what did he write here? Oh, it came out weird. Okay, tell us about Sorry. There it is. Tell us about one of your favorite performances. Just one of your favorite performances and where you were and what made it special.
Great question. Well, as we say, every performance is our favorite, but I have to say that there are two places that feel very special to me where I perform. One of them is, of course, Carnegie Hall. It's Carnegie Hall, you're there, you made it. So I was fortunate enough to play there several times and with orchestras. And I have to say that this place, first of all, has an amazing acoustic, amazing. And what is interesting is it's not only the amazing acoustic from when you're in the audience, but when you're on stage, you hear yourself so clearly. And it's not the fact and the truth in many other wonderful halls. So that's number one. And number two, my favorite hall, the hall where I grew up as a child, where I started going from 6 years old to the concerts, and then when I ended up performing, is of course the great hall of Moscow Conservatory. Also one of the best acoustics in the world, both on stage and off stage. And I was really lucky that not only that I've performed there, but when I recorded my Bach concertos and my Vivaldi concertos, we recorded there at night. So the acoustic is so special. I still feel that you can be in the best studio. It could be the best acoustics, but when you're in the hall and you do a recording, not a live recording, but a real recording, where you can edit it, but in the hall, it just makes it so special. So I would say these performances really, and that recording really sort of probably sticks in my head as favorite.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. One last question. Tell me how do you think we can move forward as an artistic community, both as individuals and as like an entire musical culture? How do we move forward in this post-COVID generation? What do you think is going to be the new look of music? And give me some thoughts.
Well, first of all, I really think that, and it's not just an empty phrase, musicians should really help each other out. Because, we know that even though we all know each other, there are certain cliques, that, I will invite this person to perform and I will not invite this person. We all know that. So I feel that at this dire circumstances, we really should try to help each other and include as many people in the performances as we can, and really invite all sorts of different people, different performances, different repertoire into our life. That's number one. Number two, as you said, I think virtual and recordings will become more important than they were before, because this is the way for people to connect with us, for us to connect with people in our audience. So that certainly will be, as I said, same as the university, there's going to be some sort of a combination first of live performances or live performances featured online even, and a performances on stage. But, I'm an optimist. I feel that we will get either the medicine or vaccine or something, and I would hope from things will slowly start sort of going back to normal. I'm hoping, I'm an optimist, but I know it's very, very hard for a lot of us because there's really, very few live performances that we can look forward to. And again, we don't know how many people will show up, how it's going to be. So we're all in the dark here. I'm sure you agree with me in that.
I think as creative artists, we're usually optimistic. I don't think you go into this business unless you're optimistic and looking forward to creating. And but that was all very, very powerful words. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Julia.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure being, with you and with your program. I'm looking forward to your new programs with our colleagues. And I hope that we can invite our audience to the concert soon,
well,
one day soon, right?
I hope to keep this going as a conversation, and we can promote each other's work, and we can talk about what we're up to and, the innovations we're making, that we're not just talking about how we're home and we're wishing we were performing, but soon enough we will be performing again, and find that keep that passion, keep that energy, keep practicing, keep making these connections. I think it's really important that in this time of isolation, many of us are working on the next chapter, and these are going to be the concepts and the the collaborations that impact the artistic worlds for the next couple of years.
I agree with you. I think it's very important to kind of get past all the disappointments and start preparing, for the future projects, and in whichever form they may be.
Well, thank you very much, Julia. Good night, and make sure you subscribe to Julia's channel and view her work, and make sure you listen to her wonderful playing and follow her as her career grows. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, and goodbye. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Music Matters 2020 with Jason Tramm. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Hit that bell for the most current information on upcoming guests and topics. Also, like us on Facebook, and consider becoming a Patreon patron, as music has hit the arts so difficultly and so hard these days. Make sure you support the artists you love, and also help us support this show. This is a labor of love that I produce from the basement of my home with my son Quentin and my daughter Rosalind, and we're delighted to have them here with us tonight. Thank you so much to Julia, and I look forward to our next show on Thursday, which we call Unrolling the Toilet Paper Diva. Christina Major, an acclaimed soprano who has become a YouTube and internet sensation with her. She is the toilet paper diva, as you're going to see, so you're not going to want to miss that. She had over 500,000 views on Facebook and 61,000 on YouTube, so make sure you tune in. Thank you so much, and keep music alive.